Section 5 of Tanglewood Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ellie. Tanglewood Tales by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The Pygmies Part 2. Any other mortal man, except the very one whom Antaeus had now encountered, would have been half frightened to death by the giant's ferocious aspect and terrible voice. But the stranger did not seem at all disturbed. He carelessly lifted his club and balanced it in his hand, measuring Antaeus with his eye, from head to foot, not as if wonder-smitten at his stature, but as if he had seen a great many giants before, and this was by no means the biggest of them. In fact, if the giant had been no bigger than the Pygmies, who stood pricking up their ears and looking and listening to what was going forward, the stranger could not have been less afraid of them. "Who are you, I say?" roared Antaeus again. "What's your name? Why do you come hither? Speak, you vagabond, or I'll try the thickness of your skull with my walking stick." "You are a very discourteous giant," answered the stranger quietly, "and I shall probably have to teach you a little civility before we part. As for my name, it is Hercules. I have come hither because this is the most convenient road to the garden of the Hesperides, whither I am going to get 3 of the golden apples for King Eurystheus." "You shall go no farther," bellowed Antaeus, putting on a grimmer look than before, for he had heard of the mighty Hercules, and hated him because he was said to be so strong. "Neither shall you go back whence you came." "How will you prevent me," asked Hercules, "from going whither I please?" "By hitting you a rap with this pine tree here," shouted Antaeus, scowling so that he made himself the ugliest monster in Africa. "I am 50 times stronger than you, and now that I stamp my foot on the ground, I am 500 times stronger. I am ashamed to kill such a puny dwarf as you seem to be. I will make a slave of you, and you shall likewise be the slave of my brethren here, the Pygmies. So throw down your club and all your weapons, and as for the lion's skin, I intend to have a pair of gloves made." "Come and take it off my shoulders then," answered Hercules, lifting his club. Then the giant, grinning with rage, strode tower-like towards the stranger, 10 times strength at every step, and fetched a monstrous blow at him with his pine tree, which Hercules caught upon his club. And being more skilful than Antaeus, he paid him back such a rap upon the sconce that down tumbled the great lumbering man mountain, flat upon the ground. The poor little Pygmies, who really never dreamed that anybody in the world was half so strong as their brother Antaeus, were a good deal dismayed at this. But no sooner was the giant down, than up he bounced again with tenfold might, and such a furious visage as was horrible to behold. He aimed another blow at Hercules, but struck awry, being blinded with wrath, and only hit his pure innocent Mother Earth, who groaned and trembled at the stroke. His pine tree went so deep into the ground and stuck there so fast that before Antaeus could get it out, Hercules brought down his club across his shoulders with a mighty thwack, which made the giant roar, as if all sorts of intolerable noises had come screeching and rumbling out of his immeasurable lungs in that one cry. Away it went, over the mountains and the valleys, and for aught I know, was heard on the other side of the African deserts. As for the Pygmies, their capital city was laid in ruins by the concussion and vibration of the air, and though there was uproar enough without the help, they set up a shriek out of 3 millions of little throats, fancying, no doubt, that they swelled the giant's blow at least 10 times as much. Meanwhile, Antaeus had scrambled upon his feet again, and pulled his pine tree out of the earth, and, all aflame with fury and more outrageously strong than ever, he ran at Hercules and brought down another blow. "This time, rascal," shouted he, "you shall not escape me." But once more Hercules warded off the stroke with his club, and the giant's pine tree was shattered into 1,000 splinters, most of which flew among the Pygmies, and did more mischief than I like to think about. Before Antaeus could get out of the way, Hercules let drive again, and gave him another knock-down blow, which sent him heels over head, but served only to increase his already enormous and insufferable strength. As for his rage, there was no telling what a fiery furnace it had now got to be. His one eye was nothing but a circle of red flame. Having now no weapons but his fists, he doubled them up, each bigger than a hogshead, smote one against the other, and danced up and down with absolute frenzy, flourishing his immense arms about, as if he meant not merely to kill Hercules, but to smash the whole world to pieces. "Come on," roared this thundering giant. "Let me hit you but one box on the ear, and you'll never have a headache again." Now Hercules, though strong enough, as you already know, to hold the sky up, began to be sensible that he should never win the victory if he kept on knocking Aeneas down, for, by and by, if he hit him such hard blows, the giant would inevitably, by the help of his Mother Earth, become stronger than the mighty Hercules himself. So throwing down his club, with which he had fought so many dreadful battles, the hero stood ready to receive his antagonist with naked arms. "Step forward," cried he. "Since I have broken your pine tree, we'll try which is the better man at the wrestling match." "Aha, then I'll soon satisfy you," shouted the giant; for, if there was one thing on which he prided himself more than another, it was his skill in wrestling. "Villain, I'll fling you where you can never pick yourself up again." On came Aeneas, hopping and capering with the scorching heat of his rage, and getting new vigor wherewith to wreak his passion every time he hopped. But Hercules, you must understand, was wiser than this numbskull of a giant, and had thought of a way to fight him, huge earth-born monster that he was, and to conquer him too, in spite of all that his Mother Earth could do for him. Watching his opportunity as the mad giant made a rush at him, Hercules caught him round the middle with both hands, lifted him high into the air, and held him aloft overhead. Just imagine it, my dear little friends, what a spectacle it must have been to see this monstrous fellow sprawling in the air, face downwards, kicking out his long legs and wriggling his whole vast body, like a baby when its father holds it at arm's length towards the ceiling. But the most wonderful thing was, that as soon as Aeneas was fairly off the earth, he began to lose the vigor which he had gained by touching it. Hercules soon perceived that his troublesome enemy was growing weaker, both because he struggled and kicked with less violence, and because the thunder of his big voice subsided into a grumble. The truth was that unless the giant touched Mother Earth as often as once in 5 minutes, not only his overgrown strength, but the very breath of his life would depart from him. Hercules had guessed his secret, and it may be well for us all to remember it, in case we should ever have to fight a battle with a fellow like Aeneas. For these earth-born creatures are only difficult to conquer on their own ground, but may easily be managed if we can contrive to lift them into a loftier and purer region. So it proved with the poor giant, whom I am really a little sorry for, notwithstanding his uncivil way of treating strangers who came to visit him. When his strength and breath were quite gone, Hercules gave him a huge body toss, and flung it about a mile off, where it fell heavily, and lay with no more motion than a sandhill. It was too late for the giant's Mother Earth to help him now, and I should not wonder if his ponderous bones were lying on the same spot to this very day, and were mistaken for those of an uncommonly large elephant. But alas me, what a wailing did the poor little pygmies set up when they saw their enormous brother treated in this terrible manner. If Hercules heard their shrieks, however, he took no notice, and perhaps fancied them only the shrill plaintive twittering of small birds that had been frightened from their nests by the uproar of the battle between himself and Aeneas. Indeed, his thoughts had been so much taken up with the giant that he had never once looked down at the pygmies, nor even knew that there was such a funny little nation in the world. And now, as he travelled a good way, and was also rather weary from his exertions in the fight, he spread out his lion's skin on the ground, and, reclining himself upon it, fell fast asleep. As soon as the pygmies saw Hercules preparing for a nap, they nodded their little heads to one another, and winked with their little eyes, and when his deep regular breathing gave them notice that he was asleep, they assembled together in an immense crowd, spreading over a space of about 27 feet square. One of their most eloquent orators, and a valiant warrior enough, besides, though hardly so good at any other weapon as he was with his tongue, climbed upon a toadstool, and from that elevated position addressed the multitude. His sentiments were pretty much as follows, or at all events something like this was probably the utmost of his speech. Tall pygmies and mighty little men, you and all of us have seen what a public calamity has been brought to pass, and what an insult has here been offered to the majesty of our nation. Yonder lies Aeneas, our great friend and brother, slain within our territory by a miscreant who took him at disadvantage and fought him, if fighting can be called, in a way that neither man nor giant nor pygmy ever dreamed of fighting until this hour, and adding a grievous contumely to the wrong already done to us. The miscreant has now fallen asleep as quietly as if nothing were to be dreaded from our wrath. It behooves you, fellow countrymen, to consider in what aspect we shall stand before the world, and what will be the verdict of impartial history, should we suffer these accumulated outrages to go unavenged. Aeneas was our brother, born of that same beloved parent to whom we owe the thews and sinews, as well as the courageous hearts, which made him proud of our relationship. He was our faithful ally, and fell fighting as much for our national rights and immunities as for his personal ones. We and our forefathers have dwelt in friendship with him, and held affectionate intercourse as man to man, through immemorial generations. We remember how often our entire people have reposed in his great shadow, and how our little ones have played hide and seek in the tangles of his hair, and how his mighty footsteps have familiarly gone to and fro among us, and never trodden upon any of our toes. And there lies this dear brother, this sweet and amiable friend, this brave and faithful ally, this virtuous giant, this blameless and excellent Aeneas, dead, dead, silent, powerless, a mere mountain of clay. Forgive my tears, nay, I behold your own. Were we to drown the world with them, could the world blame us? But to resume, shall we, my countrymen, suffer this wicked stranger to depart unharmed, and triumph in his treacherous victory among distant communities of the earth? Shall we not rather compel him to leave his bones here on our soil, by the side of our slain brother's bones? So that, while one skeleton shall remain as the everlasting monument of our sorrow, the other shall endure as long, exhibiting to the whole human race a terrible example of pygmy vengeance. Such is the question. I put it to you in full confidence of a response that shall be worthy of our national character, and calculated to increase rather than diminish the glory which our ancestors have transmitted to us, and which we ourselves have proudly vindicated in our warfare with the Grains. The orator was here interrupted by a burst of irrepressible enthusiasm. Every individual pygmy crying out that the national honor must be preserved at all hazards. He bowed, and making a gesture for silence, wound up his harangue in the following admirable manner. It only remains for us then to decide whether we shall carry on the war in our national capacity, one united people against a common enemy, or whether some champion, famous in former fights, shall be selected to defy the slayer of our brother Aeneas in single combat. In the latter case, though not unconscious that there may be taller men among you, I hereby offer myself for that enviable duty. And believe me, dear countrymen, whether I live or die, the honor of this great country and the fame bequeathed us by our heroic progenitors shall suffer no diminution in my hands. Never, while I can wield this sword, of which I now fling away the scabbard, never, 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 even if the crimson hand that slew the great Aeneas shall lay me prostrate like him on the soil which I give my life to defend. So saying, this valiant pygmy drew out his weapon, which was terrible to behold, being as long as the blade of a penknife, and sent the scabbard whirling over the heads of the multitude. His speech was followed by an uproar of applause, as its patriotism and self-devotion unquestionably deserved, and the shouts and clapping of hands would have been greatly prolonged had they not been rendered quite inaudible by a deep respiration, vulgarly called a snore, from the sleeping Hercules. It was finally decided that the whole nation of pygmies should set to work to destroy Hercules, not be it understood from any doubt that a single champion would be capable of putting him to the sword, but because he was a public enemy, and all were desirous of sharing in the glory of his defeat. There was a debate whether the national honor did not demand that the herald should be sent with a trumpet to stand over the ear of Hercules, and after blowing a blast right into it to defy him to the combat by formal proclamation. But 2 or 3 venerable pygmies, well versed in state affairs, gave it as their opinion that war already existed, and that it was their rightful privilege to take the enemy by surprise. Moreover, if awakened and allowed to get upon his feet, Hercules might happen to do them a mischief before he could be beaten down again. For, as these sage counsellors remarked, the stranger's club was really very big, and it had rattled like a thunderbolt against the skull of Aeneas. So the pygmies resolved to set aside all foolish punctilios and assail their antagonist at once. Accordingly, all the fighting men of the nation took their weapons, and went boldly up to Hercules, who lay fast asleep, little dreaming of the harm which the pygmies meant to do him. A body of 20,000 archers marched in front, with their little bows all ready and the arrows on the string. The same number were ordered to clamber upon Hercules, some with spades to dig his eyes out, and others with bundles of hay, and all manner of rubbish with which they intended to plug up his mouth and nostrils, so that he might perish for the lack of breath. This last, however, could by no means perform the appointed duty, inasmuch as the enemy's breath rushed out of his nose in an hurricane and whirlwind, which blew the Pygmies away as fast as they came nigh. It was found necessary, therefore, to hit upon some other method of carrying on the war. After holding a council, the captains ordered their troops to collect sticks, straws, dry weeds, and whatever combustible stuff they could find, and make a pile of it, heaping it high around the head of Hercules. As a great many thousand Pygmies were employed in this task, they soon brought together several bushels of inflammatory material, and raised so tall a heap that mounting on its summit they were quite upon the level of the sleeper's face. The archers meanwhile were stationed within bowshot, with orders to let fly at Hercules the instant that he stirred. Everything being in readiness, a torch was applied to the pile, which immediately burst into flames, and soon waxed hot enough to roast the enemy, had he but chosen to lie still. A Pygmy, you know, though so very small, might set the world on fire just as easily as a giant could, so that this was certainly the very best way of dealing with their foe, provided they could have kept him quiet while the conflagration was going forward. But no sooner did Hercules begin to be scorched than he started with his hair in red blaze. "What is all this?" he cried, bewildered with sleep, and staring about him as if he expected to see another giant. At that moment the 20,000 archers twanged their bowstrings, and the arrows came whizzing like so many winged mosquitoes right into the face of Hercules. But I doubt whether more than half a dozen of them punctured the skin, which was remarkably tough, as you know the skin of a hero has good need to be. "Villain!" shouted the Pygmies all at once. "You killed the giant Aeneas, our brother, and the ally of our nation. We declare bloody war against you, and will slay you on the spot." Surprised at the shrill piping of so many little voices, Hercules, after putting out the conflagration of his hair, gazed all round about, but could see nothing. At last, however, looking narrowly on the ground, he espied the innumerable assemblage of Pygmies at his feet. He stooped down, and taking up the nearest one between his thumb and finger, set him on the palm of his hand, and held him at proper distance for examination. It chanced to be the very identical Pygmy who had spoken from the top of the toadstool, and had offered himself as a champion to meet Hercules in single combat. "What in the world, my little fellow," ejaculated Hercules, "may you be?" "I am your enemy," answered the valiant Pygmy, in his mightiest speak. "You have slain the enormous Aeneas, our brother, by the mother's side, and for ages the faithful ally of our illustrious nation. We are determined to put you to death, and for my own part I challenge you to instant battle on equal ground." Hercules was so tickled by the Pygmy's big words and warlike gestures that he burst into a great explosion of laughter, and almost dropped the poor little mite of a creature off the palm of his hand, through the ecstasy and convulsion of his merriment. "Upon my word," cried he, "I thought I had seen wonders before to-day, hydras with 9 heads, stags with golden horns, 6-legged men, 3-headed dogs, giants with furnaces in their stomachs, and nobody knows what besides. But here on the palm of my hand stands a wonder that outgoes them all. Your body, my little friend, is about the size of an ordinary man's finger. Pray, how big may your soul be?" "As big as your own," said the Pygmy. Hercules was touched by the little man's dauntless courage, and could not help acknowledging such a brotherhood with him as one hero feels with another. "My good little people," said he, making a low obeisance to the grand nation, "not for all the world would I do an intentional injury to such brave fellows as you. Your hearts seem to me so exceedingly great that upon my honor I marvel how your small bodies contain them. I sue for peace, and as a condition of it will take 5 strides, and be out of your kingdom at the 6th. Good-bye. I shall pick my steps carefully, for fear of treading upon 50 of you without knowing it." For once Hercules acknowledges himself vanquished. Some writers say that Hercules gathered up the whole race of Pygmies in his lion's skin and carried them home to Greece, for the children of King Eurystheus to play with. But this is a mistake. He left them, one and all, within their own territory, where, for aught I can tell, their descendants are alive to the present day, building their little houses, cultivating their little fields, spanking their little children, waging their little warfare with the cranes, doing their little business, whatever it may be, and reading their little histories of ancient times. In those histories, perhaps, it stands recorded that a great many centuries ago the valiant Pygmies avenged the death of the giant Aeneas by scaring away the mighty Hercules. End of Part 2 of The Pygmies. Recording by Ellie, July 2009.